Dear listeners, welcome to the Deep Journal channel. By subscribing to our channel, you can be informed about detailed reports every time. While the nuclear talks in Vienna continue, Iran's material and military shipments to many militant groups in the Middle East continue recklessly. The attacks carried out by Iran in many parts of the Middle East by hiding behind the negotiations have increased recently. In particular, the recent attacks by Iranian-backed militants on the U.S. military headquarters and the missile systems they placed on the Israeli border fell like a bombshell. Iran-backed militants, who are preparing for a massive attack in the Middle East with the call of Iran, threatened the region by carrying out serious arms shipments, especially around Israel. In addition, it has been determined that Iran has made many sea shipments to the Houthi militants in Yemen in the past few weeks. In particular, according to information received from local sources, it is reported that some of these shipments could not be detected and that Iran transferred very dangerous chemical weapons, missiles, machine guns and high-level attack drones to the Houthi militants in Yemen. We mentioned earlier that Iran has transferred shaded 136 kamikaze drones to Yemen and that the range of these drones is sufficient to hit Israel. While Iran is crushed under U.S. sanctions, it often earns the investment fees required for these transfers through illegal means such as maritime trade, arms smuggling and drug smuggling. On the other hand, the United States went into a state of alert in the Arabian Sea in order to take precautions against Iran's illegal shipments. The warships USS Tempest and USS Typhoon do not let the shipping ships depart from Iran. Today, $4 million worth of heroin was seized by the U.S. Navy on a flagless ship departing from Iran and heading towards Yemen. It has been reported that the purpose of this shipment is to provide economic support to militant groups that have been experiencing great difficulties in the Middle East in recent days. Commander Timothy Hawkins, spokesman for the Fifth Fleet of the U.S. Navy, did not point directly to Iran as the target, but said that the team that carried out the shipment was entirely Iranian nationals. With the meticulous operations carried out by the U.S. forces affiliated with the CTF 150 team, Iran's shipments have been tried to be prevented recently. As you may recall, a few days ago, Iran tried to deliver a large amount of weapons to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Last week, the U.S. Navy seized a ship in the Arabian Sea with thousands of guns and large quantities of ammunition on board. It turned out that this ship was also of Iranian origin. This shipment was also blocked by the operation of the U.S. Navy. In the operation carried out by the U.S. Navy in the Arabian Sea, it seized 1,400 Kalashnikov-style rifles and 226,600 shells going to Yemen. After these weapons reached the Houthi rebels in Yemen, it turned out that the Houthis were planning a massive attack in the region. About 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Navy rescued 5 Iranian sailors and confiscated more than 2 tons of marijuana, methamphetamine, and heroin worth more than $14.7 million after an explosion on their ship crossing the Gulf of Oman. We will soon examine the major operations carried out by the U.S. Navy against Iranian ships in all its striking details. In a news shared in the local press, it was reported that U.S. targets were determined on the ship and that large attacks would be carried out on U.S. headquarters in different parts of the Middle East with the weapons transferred. Experts believe that not only Iran but also Russia is behind these shipments. Russia, which absolutely does not want the presence of the USA in the Middle East, especially in Syria, has recently provided serious assistance to the Iranian-backed militants in the region, targeting critical U.S. bases. It is thought that Iran aims to start a major war in the Middle East to get out of this crisis in the last days. This move is planned to be made while the Vienna talks continue. Because the USA still follows a soft policy towards Iran within the framework of the Vienna talks. However, after the negative outcome of the Vienna talks, the US announced that it would launch a serious attack on Iran, which tied Iran's hands. For this reason, they feel compelled to rush. In the coming days, the Middle East may be the scene of much hotter conflicts. U.S. Navy seizes aboard vessel likely coming from Iran. The U.S. Navy seized about 849 pounds of heroin worth roughly $4 million from an Iranian manned vessel in the Arabian Sea, officials announced Thursday. The major drug bust was carried out Monday by the USS Tempest and USS Typhoon vessels working as part of an international naval task force. Commander Timothy Hawkins, a spokesperson for the U.S. Navy's Mideast-based Fifth Fleet, did not say where the drugs were heading or who manufactured them. U.S. Coast Guard personnel who were aboard the two USS vessels discovered the illegal drugs while carrying out a flag verification boarding of the stateless fishing vessel, as is customary with international law. The U.S. forces, who were part of the Combined Task Force, CTF, 150, destroyed the confiscated drugs at sea, according to a release from Combined Maritime Forces. CTF 150 is one of 3 task forces that work under the larger Combined Maritime Forces. This latest seizure is a demonstration that CTF 150 and assigned surface and air assets are ready to conduct interdiction operations 365 days a year, said Royal New Zealand Navy Captain Brendan Clark, commander of CTF 150. All 9 of the stateless fishing vessel's crew members identified themselves as Iranian nationals, Hawkins said. The Navy believes that the vessel also came from Iran. The crew and vessel were released after the U.S. Navy seized the illegal drugs, the release said. This interdiction highlights the incredible work of our ships and sailors and serves as a reminder of the value in having forward-deployed naval forces on scene and ready, said Lieutenant Commander Jordan Bradford, the USS Typhoon's commanding officer. As the task force ramps up regional patrols, it has confiscated illegal drugs worth over $193 million during operations at sea this year, more than the amount of drugs seized in the last 4 years combined, its statement said. Heroin is trafficked to the Middle East and even Europe by land from Iran and Afghanistan through well-worn land routes in the Balkans, southern Caucasus Mountains or Saudi Arabia, according to last year's UN Global Synthetic Drugs Assessment. Smugglers from Iran have increasingly taken to sea to bring heroin into South Asia, the report added, with Iranian and Pakistani sailors often arrested near Sri Lanka. Iran's porous 1,195-mile, 1,923-kilometer, eastern border with Afghanistan, the world's largest producer of opium, has turned it into a key transit country for the illicit drug trade. Also mid-December, U.S. Navy says large weapons shipment from Iran to Yemen's Houthi rebels seized from stateless ship. The U.S. Navy said it seized a large cache of assault rifles and ammunition being smuggled by a fishing ship from Iran likely bound for war-ravaged Yemen. U.S. Navy patrol ships discovered the weapons aboard what the Navy described as a stateless fishing vessel in an operation that began on Monday in the northern reaches of the Arabian Sea off Oman and Pakistan. Sailors boarded the vessel and found 1,400 Kalashnikov-style rifles and 226,600 rounds of ammunition, as well 5 Yemeni crew members. It's just the latest interdiction amid the grinding civil war in Yemen that pits Iran-backed Houthi rebels against a Saudi-led military coalition. Western nations and UN experts repeatedly have accused Iran of smuggling illicit weapons and technology into Yemen over the years, fueling the civil war and enabling the Houthis to fire missiles and drones into neighboring Saudi Arabia. Iran denies arming the Houthis despite evidence to the contrary. In an unusually pointed move, the statement late Wednesday from the Navy's Bahrain-based Fifth Fleet blamed Iran for sending the weapons, saying the boat was sailing along a route historically used to traffic weapons unlawfully to the Houthis in Yemen. The direct or indirect supply, sale or transfer of weapons to the Houthis violates UN Security Council resolutions and U.S. sanctions, the statement added. Iran's mission to the United Nations did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the interception. U.S. Navy patrol ships transferred the confiscated weapons to the guided missile destroyer USS O'Kane before sinking the fishing vessel because of the hazard it posed to commercial shipping. It said the Yemeni crew would be repatriated. American seizures of arms bound for Yemen's war, typically Kalashnikov rifles, machine guns and rocket-propelled grenade launchers, began in 2016 and have continued intermittently. The Navy's Fifth Fleet said it has confiscated some 8,700 illicit weapons so far this year across the 2.5 million square mile area it patrols, including the strategically important Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. In addition to all of this, the U.S. officially announced at the beginning of the month that the U.S. Navy had seized hundreds of missiles and millions of barrels of oil products belonging to the Iranian army, in retaliation for Iran's maritime smuggling and its grumble in nuclear negotiations. The U.S. Navy seized 171 surface-to-air missiles, 8 anti-tank missiles and 1.1 million barrels of petroleum products worth $261 million from 2 Iranian ships in the Arabian Sea in 3 separate instances since 2019, the Department of Justice said in a press release on Tuesday. The Navy seized the weapons in November 2019 and August 2020 during what is called routine operations in the sea. The arms shipments were headed to Iran-backed militants fighting in war-torn Yemen, and were organized by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, which the U.S. deems a terrorist organization, according to the DOJ. Wednesday's announcement followed the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. issuing a final order of forfeiture for the arms shipments on November 15, the DOJ wrote. The petroleum was officially forwarded in October 2021, after American officials won approval from a Washington, D.C. court to sell the fuel taken from 4 Iranian ships the year prior. The U.S. proved the Iranian military would have profited from the sale of the petroleum to militias in Yemen. The actions of the United States in these 2 cases strike a resounding blow to the government of Iran and to the criminal networks supporting Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, said Matthew Olson, the Assistant Attorney General with the Justice Department's National Security Division. Matthew Graves, U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., also applauded the Navy sailors for the seizure of valuable arms and fuel from an enemy country. These 2 cases demonstrate that not only can we disrupt the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' ability to finance its operations through petroleum sales, but we can also thwart its ability to use the proceeds of such sales to arm its terrorist proxies and export terrorism abroad, Graves said in the press release. The U.S. and Iran have escalated tensions in the Middle East following the assassination of top General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020. Tehran struck an American military base in retaliation for his death that month, and the country has also been blamed for an October drone strike on a U.S. base in Syria and the seizure of a tanker in the Arabian Sea. The U.S. is in the midst of indirect talks with Iran over potentially restarting a 2015 nuclear deal that limited Iranian nuclear development in return for the lifting of economic sanctions.